So here's a topic about line thickness or what I call line weights and the reason why we do line weights. Here's an example of something that's inked with just a flat line weight. So something where like an artist would just use like either a size 8 or size 3 or size 5, and they would just ink one line. And this is what I call a dead line. There's really no line weights going on. There's no line variations, and there's no line thick to thin or anything like that. So it just looks dead. So when I'm inking, a lot of times I'll use a brush pen or just a regular brush, any kind of brush you can use as long as it's a brush, or you can also use a quill. And in this case, I'm going to demonstrate how I'm going to approach doing line weights. I'll have a bottle of ink. The ink I have here is super black, made by Speedball, and I'm just using a pocket brush, a disposable pocket brush. I'll just dip it in there. Okay, and a lot of times before I start inking, I'll go on the side with a scratch piece of paper, and I'll make sure I can get it into a nice fine tip. As long as you can get a nice tip, then you can start doing a lot of effects with this. Now, again, back to this. This was just a dead line. You notice that even though if I'm using different microns, different shape, like this is maybe a 0.05 and this is a 0.3 and this is a 0.8, it does show foreground, but it's not as, it doesn't create as much depth as you can when you're doing line weights. I'm going to demonstrate some line weights inking this piece here. So this is a piece that was printed off of a blue line, and right here I'll slowly start inking lines like this, okay, like that. And then as I'm inking, I'll bounce the line weights around, some areas thicker and then some areas thinner. Okay, you notice that I'll also like making some of the lines sharper and thin. Most of the times when I'm inking, I'll like to taper off the lines like that. And for the most part, a good rule of thumb is that the sun is always coming from up here. And because the sun is coming from the sky, the bottom portion of, like, for example, this person's arm is going to be a little bit thicker. So I'm going to ink this piece. I'll taper this off like that. And then on the bottom part, I'll ink this thicker and I'll bounce the line weights around. The more you bounce the line weight around, the more that artwork is going to have depth into it. It's going to make a 2D image look like a 3D image. So the majority of the time we do line weights is when we're doing the holding lines. Holding lines is the outside of the character, like for example, around here, around here. So right here, I'll bounce the line weight around. You notice that I'll go thin, and I'll go thick, and I'll go thin again. I'll start with a thin line. I'll make it beefy, and I'll make it thin. And then here, I'll start thin, and I'll push down again, okay? Right here, I'll do this again. Right over here, I'll go thick, and I'll whip the brush like that, okay? So right here, thick, thin. See, now we have variation on the line weight, okay? Right here, I'm going to ink some of this line. I'm going to go thicker on the bottom because it's heavier down there, and we're going to go all the way up here, and then it's thinner. So I'll press down on the brush, and as I'm gliding up, I'll lightly ease up on the brush, okay? It's much better than a flat line that's just a dead flat line, okay? Now, I'm going to do some line weights on these flat lines and show you what a difference having line weights can make into a an object to pop out in the foreground. So right here, I'm just going to ink on top of it, thicker here and thinner, thicker and then thinner. Just that one stroke alone makes a big difference in the variation of the line, okay? Makes the artwork much better, okay? Like this arm over here is just a flat arm, but once I start bouncing that line weight around, it just looks so much more 3D in depth, okay? Right here, like her dress is just a dead line. It's really hard to tell what's going on, but once I bounce that line around, it just looks so much better. Now I'm going to demonstrate a few more lines over here. I'll start thin. The best way I can explain when you're inking lines is you want to start with a brush and press down into it to get those thick variations. You want to ink very lightly. You don't always want to press down. A lot of people, when they're drawing, they're so used to drawing in pencil that they're always pressing down very hard. With inking, it's not just drawing the lines, it's also controlling how much pressure you're pushing into the brush and how much pressure you're easing up. So that is very important. Okay, so some of the hair, I would bounce that line around. So I'll ink the outline of the hair. So here I'll go thicker and thin, and I go thicker around there. Okay, some of the face, I'm going to ink this part like that. Thicker on the bottom, because that's where usually the light's not going to show. I'll bounce the face around. As I get up to here, I get thin. And right here, I get a little bit thicker. Okay, see that? I'm going to hold this closer to the screen. See that line weight going on? Okay, and as I go towards the top, because this is on the inside of the body, I go very light. Now on the outside of the hair, I'll press down on it. I'll ease up. I'll press down on it, and I'll ease up. Okay, a lot of bouncing around. And this does take a little bit of practice just to get to this stage. Okay, you notice I'm pressing down, and then I'm lightening up. I'm controlling what areas I want to be dark and which area I want to be light, which area to be thicker and which area to be thinner. Okay, just like this. Okay. The better you can bounce the line weight, the more depth and image is going to look. Okay. You should be able to control how to ink with the brush to get really thin lines. Now this was inking with a brush, and I'm just controlling. Any brush will do as long as you can get a nice sharp tip to the brush. You should be able to do a good job of doing some of the inking. Okay, I'll ink some of the hands right here. This is drawn and it's a flat line. This is how an inker approaches inking a hand and giving that hand some texture to it. So I'll go thicker, thinner. I'll press down here. And then some artists, like new artists, they'll ask, how do I know what area to go thinner and which area to go thicker? With practice, you understand which areas should be thicker and which areas to be thinner. A good rule of thumb is just to figure out where the light source is. The light source, for the most part, is coming from the sky. In other cases, depending on where the light is coming from, you can ink accordingly. Okay, I'm going to ink this part. Now here, now you notice that this shirt is just one line. There's really no shadow. This artwork was penciled by Chris Sprouse. I was one of the inkers for this project for Jupiter Circle. And this line is just that line. So I'm going to ink this line and also create some line variation. And this will give this jacket in the front moving forward, and then the shirt and the pants in the back. Okay, I'll ink this line and demonstrate what I mean by that. So first, I'll go lightly. I'll do a ghost line. Ghost line is where I'm making that hand movement to make sure I can ink that line. And you'll see me spinning the paper every so often like this, just so I can get that correct line. Once I'm happy with the line, I make sure I get a nice tip. And once it gets going, then I'll press down and I'll draw that line like this. Okay, now we have a thin line going thicker. Not only that, I look at some of the inside, like for example this pants area. I'm going to go in here, ink that line, and go thicker there. So now you can see some of the inside of the line. Even though the penciler or you as an artist who didn't draw that initially in the pencil, you can go in there and start adding that ink. Right here, here's a fold of the inside of the shirt. I'm going to create some depth in here. Thicker, thinner. Okay, and then I'm just going to follow through like that. See, now we can see some of his shirt inside, and it just created more depth in here. Just like here, instead of just inking the line like this, I'm going to add a little bit thicker here, and then you can see more depth. Same with his pants. On the inside, I'll just ink this line like that, like this, and I'll make some certain areas thicker. That. Okay, I'm going to continue inking the rest of his outfit so you can see how I approach line variations. Okay, and it's mostly about just bouncing your brush around. If you're using a crow quill or a nib or a micron, you can do the same thing, but with a brush or a crow quill, you can accomplish the same task, but some are easier than another. Okay, now we have this little belt over here. Okay, it's just drawn with a flat dead line. I'm going to give certain areas more of a bounce, and this is going to help with the fold look a little bit better. So I'll ink this part thicker, and I'm going to go thick and then thin right there. Watch, like that, and then I'll press down here like this, and then I'll go thin. As I'm here, I'm going to make this line thicker than this line. When a line is thicker, it pushes it to the front of the viewer. When a line is thinner, it pushes it back. So right here, I'll start with this line, I'll push in, and then on this side, I'll go thin. Okay, see that? Now this one is popping forward, and this one is going towards the back. Okay, earlier I started this with a thin line. I'm going to push this line a little bit thicker. Okay, I'm going to go thin, and I'll press down on it. And then here, I'm just going to add that line. And then I'm going to bounce this line. I'm going to go from thick, and then thin, and then thick. So I'm going to control that from thick, thin, and then thick. Okay, see that right over there to bounce that line weight right over here, thicker, thinner. Each line you ink, you always want to bounce it as much as you can. Try not to go a flat line. If you can bounce the line, the more sexy that line will look. Okay, I'm going to make this line thicker, and then very thin here, and then thicker here. So right here, thin, I'll press in, and then on this side, I just connect this. Okay, I want this side to be thicker, and I'm going to make this side thinner. There. Okay, now compare what I've inked on this figure here with the dead line figures right over there. Okay, you can tell there's a big difference in the art. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate a little bit more. So right here, we're going to imagine the light source is coming from up here. I'll press down here. I'll break up the line. I'll go thin. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you all can see a little bit better. Right here, I'm going to go here, and I'm going to press that line. See, that just gives it more of a chest area. Okay, right here, I'm going to go thick and whip it in there. And then here, just to give this some life into it, I'm going to go thick here, thin, and then I'm going to connect it. Here's this sleeve. Bounce this part right over here. Okay, I'll go thicker, and I'll bounce that line. See? And majority of the time when you're inking, it's really an artist's choice of which area you want to bounce thicker and which area you want to bounce lighter. See this part, I see this fold, and I see in my head, I see how this can be a really nice line. So this art was drawn with no blacks. It was just line work. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to press down into it. And then right now you have that nice fold on that on this shirt right over there. So right here I'm going to go here, go thicker, and thin. Okay, right here it's just a little blob there. I'm just going to press that in there, and then make that look like it's part of the folding on his clothes. Same thing, go thick, like that. Give some depth into the work, and go thin like that. Okay, it's just so much nicer having line weights compared to dead lines right there. Okay, so here I'm going to press down. And a good way to practice this is practice how to draw lines. I'm going to demonstrate. Practice how to draw thin lines and then going into thick. Okay, the more you can control that line, the more you have control of your tools. Okay, not only should you be able to go from thin to thick to thin, a good, nice way is to go from thick to thin and then back to thick. These are nice ways to practice practicing your line variations. Okay, all it is just drawing the line, controlling where you want to move the line, and also controlling how much pressure you push down and how light to ease up. Okay, right over here, just control it how you like the lines to be. And that's line weights in a nutshell. Just push those lines. So we'll take one more look. The line weights, thick to thin, line variations. When you're inking, you can also add in shadows. Some areas can be thicker, in some areas lighter. For example, right here. And the thicker you put lines, the easier it is. If you use a micron, sometimes you just have to build up on a line. You draw one line, and then you're going to go back and add more line weights to it. And this is what I'm doing with the brush. Okay.